It has been around a month since I've done a mock draft, and that means there's been a ton of changes atop the board. We now have the Tennessee Titans picking #1 overall, which is kind of crazy to me because I feel like the Giants and Raiders were so abysmal all season long. I think the Titans at least had a couple of moments where like, okay, their defense is pretty good, but somehow they fell into the #1 overall pick. The New England Patriots had a chance at that selection, but won the last game of the season against the Buffalo Bills as backups. The Patriots still tried to kind of tank that game, putting in Joe Milton, who actually played really, really good. But here we go. #1 overall pick for the Tennessee Titans. I don't know exactly what route I want to go in, but it's going to be a quarterback. I don't think they're going to be riding out Will Levis for another season. They just got rid of Rand Carthon as well, their general manager, who I do think was one of the top guys in the organization that was like, okay, let's give Will Levis a chance. I don't think he's going to be the quarterback next year, so I'm going to go Shedeur Sanders to the Tennessee Titans. Now, this is a little bit challenging for me because I do think Sanders and Ward are very close as prospects. I do think Ward has better upside because of what he can do off script, but in terms of a polished player and just somebody that's going to be pretty good right away, I do think that is Shedeur Sanders. And he has said he's fine with how the draft board shook out. He's fine going really anywhere. That's what he's saying publicly. Who knows if that's different privately. But I do think he'd be fine going to Tennessee. And the Titans kind of get a flashy box office type of player due to his name and everything surrounding him. And then another very fascinating team is the Cleveland Browns. It was just announced this morning, the day I'm filming this video, that Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles again 3 months after he got surgery. I think I read that he like sprained his ankle or twisted his ankle while he was in Miami. I don't know if it was like doing rehab or what was going on, but he ruptured his Achilles again. So he may be out for the entirety of the 2025 season, which, I mean, I guess doesn't really matter. Like if you're a Browns fan, like you probably weren't going to be very good with him anyway. But now, do the Browns want to take a quarterback here with a #2 overall pick, which would probably be Cam Ward? Or do you just take the best player available and then take a quarterback next year, assuming you're not going to be too good when the class is going to be a lot better? The quarterback class is going to be a lot better. Very fascinating to see what the Browns do here. I think they could just go out and get a veteran quarterback to be a bridge for a year. I mean, we've seen it many, many times. So with that in mind, that is the scenario I'm going to run with in today's mock draft. Let's just assume the Browns do not draft a quarterback. They're going to sign a veteran to be the bridge for the 2026 draft. And I also think they could be entering a little bit of a rebuild with Myles Garrett getting up into his late 20s. And this is when his value is going to be the highest it'll ever get. I do think Myles Garrett is going to get traded this offseason. And if you trade Myles Garrett, why not get Abdul Carter from Penn State, who looks like a young Micah Parsons? He was great in the playoffs. He got a little bit banged up and still had a fantastic game against Notre Dame in the semifinals. I think Abdul Carter has helped his stock out a ton. I think the first time I did a mock draft, I had him like the middle of the first round. Not anymore. Abdul Carter is going to go top 5, definitely top 8, I would say. I think the farthest he could go down is to Carolina. So Abdul Carter, I'm going to have him go #2, kind of the Myles Garrett replacement for the Browns as they trade him away for a couple of first-round picks and then really focus their sights on the following draft. And the New York Giants would be very happy that that happens because that means Cam Ward falls into their lap with the 3rd overall pick. The Giants, they need a quarterback. They brought back Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. Don't love that move if you're John Mara, but I do like just kind of keep the continuity there. And Cam Ward, I do think is the type of player that Brian Daboll would like because he does have that high upside. He's got a pretty good arm. I would say he has a better arm than Shedeur. He can move around better than Shedeur as well. I do think if you compare these guys to like last year's draft or even like next year's draft, I don't think these guys are going top 5, probably not even top 10. Like they're going to be mid first round, in the first round type of prospects. But just because of how weak this quarterback class is this year, inflation, these quarterbacks are going to be picked a lot higher. That's why Sanders and Ward, I don't love them as top 3 picks, but I just think with these quarterback needy teams, they're going to end up going there anyway. Now the Patriots at 4, this is really fascinating because they could go wide receiver and get Drake May a weapon like Shedeur and McMillan, he's a beast. You could even go offensive line with Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks Jr., who's maybe the best pure tackle in this draft. But how about we go Travis Hunter, another really fascinating player. I think he's going to play majority cornerback at the next level, but I do think he's also going to get some reps at receiver. So if you're the Patriots, you get a shutdown corner next to Gonzo. So you're going to have a nice 1-2 punch there. And then you're also going to have a guy that can help on offense as well with maybe, I don't know, 20 snaps a game. So that's something that could be really, really cool. I think if you just go purely on talent, you can make an argument that Travis Hunter is the most talented player in this draft class. I mean, I could definitely hear an argument with that just of how special of a player he is. And now you bring in another blue chip player to your team. Go BPA. I would really like that pick for New England here, but I do see the rationale to go maybe an offensive lineman, maybe a wide receiver here, a pure wide receiver, or maybe even trade down and get some more assets. But I think I'm going to have Travis Hunter go here to New England. The Jaguars, I'm going to follow a pretty similar route. I'm going to go Mason Graham out of Michigan, kind of going BPA again. Mason Graham is just a beast. He can do it all. He can rush the passer. He can play against the run. He's got really good size, really good explosiveness. I don't really see a world where Mason Graham turns out to be like a bust or not a really, really good football player. I mean, that's how kind of sure thing he feels at this point. And so the Jags, they did sign Eric Armstead last offseason to a pretty big contract, but he's getting up there in age. He's not really the same player that he was. And now you add Mason Graham to a defensive line with Joshua Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, and then maybe even have Eric Armstead and Mason Graham together. That could be a really dominant defensive line. I do think probably the weakest spot on their team may be in the secondary, but I don't know if the Jags would value taking Will Johnson here over Mason Graham. I just think the trenches matter a little bit more. So I'm going to go Mason Graham here. And now the Raiders at pick number 6, they would have loved to have a quarterback. They fired Tom Telesco. They fired Antonio Pierce. Tom Brady's kind of leading the search for both of those opening positions, but there's not a quarterback you're taking in the top 10, probably not even in the first round. I mean, this quarterback class is rough. So quarterback is really not an option here. And I think if I'm the Raiders, I'm just going to try and build up the infrastructure for my team once we eventually do get our quarterback of the future. Let's go Shedeur and McMillan here to pair him with Brock Bowers as kind of the main weapons for the Raiders. McMillan probably has the, I guess, clearest path to being an X wide receiver in this draft class. Tremendous size. He's got great physicality at the catch point, great hands as well, and still has some pretty decent explosiveness to him. The main question with McMillan is how is he going to separate? We see some other receivers in the league like Mike Williams, for example, who is a primarily jump ball receiver. Mike Williams, once upon a time, I also think was like a top 10 pick. So McMillan is kind of a similar mold where he didn't separate a ton in college, but if you can just get him one-on-one, he's going to come down with a 50-50 ball majority of the time. And so you pair him with Brock Bowers, whoever the Raiders can get in either free agency or next year's NFL draft, they're going to have some really fun weapons to use. The Jets at number 7, I think they could also go BPA, either pass rusher or Will Johnson here, whoever's the top of their board. I'm going to go Will Johnson, though. They do have DJ Reed. He is set to be a free agent this offseason. If you can pair Will Johnson with Sauce Gardner, that is a really fun cornerback duo. Could be one of the best in the league. Will Johnson right away is going to be an elite player, I believe. I think in most draft classes, he is the cornerback one. And I would even hear arguments out for Johnson to be better pure cornerback than Hunter. I mean, he is a really, really good player. He's got the size, speed, physicality, everything you look for in a corner. That is Will Johnson. Carolina at number 8, maybe a sneaky wide receiver pick here, but I think they need a pass rusher and defense more than anything. And I'm going to go Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. I do see Jalen Walker a lot to Carolina here, but I think Scorton is more of just your pure pass rusher. He has a lot more snaps actually lined up at defensive end, where Jalen Walker is kind of more of like your chess piece player. I think he did pass rush a lot more this year than he has in the past. I mean, he was off-ball linebacker a ton, but I just think if you're the Carolina Panthers and your best pass rusher is Jadeveon Clowney, who's over 30 years old, I think you need to focus on somebody more that's going to be actually on the ball a little bit more than kind of like a unique chess piece like Jalen Walker, who is also a little bit smaller compared to Scorton. Now, New Orleans at number 9, I'm going to go Luther Burden III out of Missouri. Another team where you really just don't know what route they're going to go in. They did keep Mickey Loomis, who just seems like he's on scholarship until, I don't know, their owner sells the team. I mean, Mickey Loomis has not been a great GM for a while. I mean, I feel like Sean Payton and Drew Brees held up that franchise for a long time, and Loomis just keeps kind of pushing the can down the road with just restructuring the contracts, and we see it every year. The Saints are like minus $100 million in the salary cap, and then somehow restructure all their like 32-plus-year-old players, and then they're somehow just breaking even. They don't really sign many free agents. They have to let some players go. Just a weird ran team. I do think they potentially could get Aaron Glenn or a solid head coach candidate, but Derek Carr is going to be their quarterback for the foreseeable future. They do not have a ton of salary cap. It's just a tough spot to go. But the thing with the Saints this year is they just did not have a ton of weaponry on the outside. And once Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed got banged up and kind of went out for the season, they had nothing. And so now you add Burden in with Shaheed as kind of the deep threat, and then Olave, if he can stay healthy, that'd be a really fun receiving core and a lot of explosiveness. So I'm going to go Burden here to New Orleans. And the Bears at number 10, I think this makes a ton of sense. Will Campbell to Chicago. I say this like every mock draft, and I feel like everybody says about Will Campbell. He does not have very long arms, so he may be better suited to play guard in the NFL, and he does struggle with some speed off the edge because he doesn't have kind of that reach to slow those guys down. But who knows? There have been some good tackles in NFL history that do not have the longest arms and still are effective at that position. So maybe he still finds a way to work there, but I do think the best position for him moving forward could be guard. And I think for the Bears specifically, they used a first-round pick on Darnell Wright a couple of years ago. I think they need somebody more specifically to play the interior right away, and I think that's where Campbell makes a lot of sense, but also gives them flexibility if he does need to kick out to one of those tackle positions. And the 49ers, I think this makes a ton of sense too. I've been seeing this fit a lot, and I really like it. Calvin Banks Jr., probably the best pure tackle in this draft. And the 49ers offensive line is one of the worst in the league. Trent Williams, he's kind of just held up that offensive line the last several years, and he's getting up there in age. He's like 37 now, 36. I mean, he's getting to that point where it's hard to rely on him on a year-to-year basis. I mean, I know he missed several games this year. Was that solely because of his injury, where the 49ers just like, and we're out of the playoffs, no need to force you into some games? But who knows? He still is getting up there in age a little bit. His durability has always been kind of a question. And even outside of that, the right tackle position is not good for the 49ers. So getting Calvin Banks Jr., who can play both of those spots, I think would make a ton of sense. Now the Dallas Cowboys at number 12. I've mocked this a ton. I'm still going to do it. Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. Jerry Jones, he loves his flashy players, and that's exactly what Jeanty is. A ton of hype, a ton of eyes will be on him. And he's also a really good player. He's not the biggest guy in the world. I think he's like below 5'9". So maybe his height becomes a question at the next level. I think he'll be fine just because of his physicality as a runner. He does have that game-breaking speed as well. He's just a really good running back prospect. And now you put him in Dallas with CeeDee Lamb. That's going to be a pretty fun offense to watch. I do think offensive line always is a potential pick here for the Cowboys, or even defensive line. Their organization really values taking trench players in the first round, guys that have high upsides and developing them. So that's always a potential for the Cowboys here. Maybe like a Jalen Walker to kind of have another chess piece with Micah Parsons. But I'm going to go to the fun pick and take Ashton Jeanty here with the 12th pick. Following that same trend, I want to do another fun pick. I'm going to go tight end here for the Miami Dolphins and go Tyler Warren out of Penn State. He has just absolutely helped his stock out so much this season, especially in the playoffs, just kind of doing everything for Penn State, running the football, passing the football, catching the football. He's a very fun player, and I think the Dolphins, who could be looking for more, I would say, physicality, Tyler Warren fits that because he can block, and that's really important in Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins offense. You need your tight ends able to block even some defensive linemen. I think Tyler Warren has that capability. And Warren also, as a pass catcher, he loves running through people. So if the Dolphins are serious about changing kind of their identity as a team, I think Tyler Warren is a perfect fit here to kind of do that. I do think potentially offensive line. The problem with that, though, for the Dolphins here with pick number 13 is they don't necessarily need like a pure tackle. They need somebody that can play guard as well, because they do have Austin Jackson on a long-term deal. They drafted a second-round tackle last year in Patrick Paul. That does not mean you don't keep investing in the tackle position, but with the 13th pick and a must-win year for Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, you probably don't want to draft another tackle that will probably not be able to get on the field for you when your job is on the line. So I had Malachi Starks mocked to the Dolphins. I think in like every mock I've done, I still really like that fit, but I'm going to change it up here, go Tyler Warren. And the number 14 for the Colts, I'm going to have them take Starks because the Colts secondary has been pretty bad for a couple of years now. And Starks, I've compared him a ton to Brian Branch of the Detroit Lions, a guy that can play the nickel, a guy that can go back and play safety. Who knows? He may even be able to play the boundary. He's just an all-around very versatile DB, and I think he's one of the best pure players in this draft. The problem, again, is his positional value. Do you want to take that with the 14th pick? Because Brian Branch was seen as like maybe the end of a first-round type player. He fell all the way to the second round. So could we see another fall like that happen for a player with a similar skill set, similar position? Who knows? But I feel like the Colts here at 14, if they don't go tight end, which maybe they take Tyler Warren if the Dolphins don't, I think Malachi Starks would make a lot of sense for Indianapolis to kind of revamp and help out their defense with a new defensive coordinator coming this year with Gus Bradley getting fired. Now, the Atlanta Falcons, they had one of the worst pass rushes in the league this year. I'm going to go Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Already talked about him a little bit. He's not like a pure pass rusher off the edge, but he also does have that capability. And with Raheem Morris's scheme, I think he will like to have a player that can drop back into coverage some, and then also be using like some stunts, some different types of blitzes. I do think he would like to have Walker kind of be that versatile piece. So Atlanta would really bolster up their pass rush, keep Walker in the state. Maybe they like to go like Mykel Williams or another pure pass rusher, but I think Jalen Walker is just a really, really fun player. And for the Falcons, who just really need some help in the front seven of their defense, getting somebody that does have the versatility to play linebacker and edge, I think makes a ton of sense. Another team that has a pretty atrocious pass rush is the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to go another Georgia player here. Mykel Williams, he has got all of the physical characteristics that you would want. Over 6'5", 260 pounds, freakishly long arms. He just needs some development in terms of just his pass rush moves. I said that a lot about some of the pass rushers that do get picked in like the middle to late first round. A lot of those guys have the good physical talent. They just need some coaching and refinement, and Mykel Williams is another guy that kind of fits that mold. But the Cardinals, they just need some more help in the trenches. They did a fairly good job hitting on some players this past offseason in their secondary, and now it's just about hitting on a couple of players in the trenches. I think their offensive line still has some struggles, and of course their defensive line. They did draft Darius Robinson last year out of Missouri, but he did not really play a ton this year. Wasn't super productive, so hopefully he can take another step in year number 2. Number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they need help on their defense. One of the worst units in the entire NFL this year. I'm going to go Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. He's a guy that's been getting a lot of hype recently and kind of moving up the boards. He's another guy that has all those physical characteristics, over 6'4", has a very quick first step. I feel like a lot of people have been comparing him to like Ed Oliver, who the Bills drafted. He's got the power and strength to hold his own in the run game, and then also just the quickness as a pass rusher. So I do think Cincinnati, who did lose DJ Reader and needs some help on the interior of that defensive line, could look to go here and get Nolan. I also do think Kenneth Grant is an option, and maybe even another pass rusher if they decide to potentially let Trey Hendrickson leave, which I think would be kind of crazy. But let's go Walter Nolan here out of Ole Miss. I think for Seattle, their biggest weakness on their team has been the offensive line for several years now. And if you're going to keep Geno Smith, who's going to be, I think, 35 years old next year, durability, his mobility are two things that are going to continue to deteriorate. I think you need to invest in the offensive line. And Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia is a guy that I think a lot of people do say should probably play guard at the next level, but he does still have the capability and a ton of starts under his belt at West Virginia playing that tackle position. So if you're Seattle, you get in Milam to maybe be playing guard for you week number 1. But if you do have some injuries or some players not playing well at either of the tackle positions, then Milam does have that flexibility to try him out there and see if it does work. I thought about Josh Simmons here, but he's off an ACL injury for starters. And then secondly, Milam does have some more size to him, conversely to Simmons. So I don't know if you want to take Simmons, who doesn't have any experience whatsoever playing guard, and having him play there from day one when you just have Milam, who does fit that criteria a little bit better. The Houston Texans, we're going to go another offensive lineman here, and it's going to be Tyler Booker out of Alabama. The Texans just really need help in the interior of their offensive line. It's like very similar to the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, their offensive line is just abysmal, and it's a big reason why this team has not been able to reach their full potential this year. And I don't love taking guards, I guess pure guards, in the middle of the first round or even in the first round whatsoever. But if you're Houston and you don't really have a ton of other needs, huge needs on your team, I think you can kind of bite the bullet and take one who you know is going to be an impact starter right away in Booker, who was a multi-year starter at Alabama against SEC defensive linemen every week. So I just think if you're trying to patch up the holes in your team, Booker makes a lot of sense. There's not really a receiver I would take here if I'm Houston, although that could be something as we look into draft time that they may want to target, with Stephon Diggs not being under contract anymore and Tank Dell now might miss maybe the entire season next year. But I think we're going to have this run on linemen with the Falcons, Cardinals, Bengals, Seahawks, and Texans all going in the trenches, 5 picks in a row. But now at number 20, the Denver Broncos, I think Sean Payton is going to get Bo Nix a weapon. We're going to go Colston Loveland out of Michigan. And the reason I like tight end here instead of a wide receiver like maybe even Emeka Egbuka for the Broncos is it's kind of what I say about the Chargers as well. Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh, they don't value taking these wide receivers or even running backs in the first round. I mean, we've seen it time and time again where you can find top end wide receivers in day 2, maybe even in day 3. And I would say about this tight end class, though, it is a very deep one. I mean, there's a lot of really good players. I mean, as you get deep into this class, I think Terrence Ferguson is a good player. Arando Gadsden from Syracuse, really good player. So maybe teams like the Broncos and Chargers see that, wait till day 2 to take a tight end and address some other needs. But I think Loveland, just with his upside as a pass catcher with his size and catch radius, is something that I do think Sean Payton might fall in love with. And the Broncos do have Courtland Sutton on the outside. If you add in Loveland as well as kind of your middle of the field, another red zone target, that could be something really fascinating to watch. Kind of like Sean Payton's new Jimmy Graham type player. But if Warren somehow made it to pick 20, or maybe the Broncos move up, I think that's another match made in heaven. At number 21 for the Buccaneers, I love the fit of Siobhan Revel out of East Carolina here. He is coming off of an ACL injury, but he was seen as like maybe a top 10 pick before that ended up happening. He's a very physically gifted player, over 6'3", around 200 pounds, and he's a physical man-to-man corner. And what does Todd Bowles like to do? Bring the house, play man-to-man in the back end, and Revel fits that perfectly. And the Buccaneers defense has taken a step back this year because they don't have a lot of really good players in the back end of their defense. They got rid of Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting as well. They kind of had to rebuild their cornerback room. And why not get Siobhan Revel here at pick number 21, who should be ready for the start of the season, and he could emerge as like their cornerback 1 in the future going forward. I like this fit a lot. Now the Steelers at 22, I've seen this pick kind of grow in popularity a lot recently. Emeka Egbuka. I think this makes a lot of sense for the Steelers. They need some more explosiveness, somebody that can play in the slot. I know they drafted Roman Wilson last year, but he missed like the entirety of the year, I think, due to an ankle injury. So I don't really know if you can count on him a ton moving forward. You got George Pickens, who seems like every week he's throwing a fit on the sideline, causing some issues. And then even then, he hasn't been great the last like month or so of the season. I think he had multiple drops, like 3 or 4 against the Bengals the last game of the season. But even outside of George Pickens, who I'm sure will be back, he's more of your X role, the guy that you throw up 50-50 balls to. He's not a fantastic separator, where Egbuka, he could be a guy underneath, kind of a chain mover, who the Steelers could really rely on. And I think for the Rams, they would love to have Josh Simmons fall to them at pick number 23. I think they actually had this mocked, maybe in my last one. But the Rams at this point have been overachieving for, I would say, 2 seasons now, where their just overall roster talent isn't like up there with some of these other teams that did make the playoffs. And I think it's due to Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. And if they still are going to have Stafford upright and healthy the next couple of years as he does approach his late 30s, you got to protect him. You got to be able to protect him. And I think Simmons, if he can get on the field, has a ton of experience playing either of those tackle positions. I think he started as a freshman at right tackle, then moved to left tackle. That flexibility could be important for the Rams, who have dealt with a ton of injuries on their offensive line even this year. The Packers at number 24, another cornerback spot, I believe, with Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. And shout out the Fighting Irish making it to the national championship this year. Who would have thought Notre Dame in the preseason would have made it that far? But Morrison, he's a guy that's also dealt with some injury stuff. I think he only played like 6 games. I don't think he even played in the college football playoffs. So that is a reason why he has fallen down the board, but he does have a lot of talent, good size, over 6 feet tall, good explosiveness and speed as well. He does have some experience playing in the slot, but I do think the Packers would kind of want to groom him to be another boundary cornerback, with Jair Alexander missing so many games now. It feels like every single season. The Chargers at 25, I like this fit as well with Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Jim Harbaugh recruited him, knows him very well. They need help in the interior of their defensive line. They have some good pass rushers with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, although they are kind of getting up there in age a little bit. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is taking a wide receiver in the first round. I don't even know if you take a running back, because this class is actually very deep with a ton of really talented players. I mean, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson, like in the middle round, that'd be really good players to get. Even like Cam Scadaboo. I mean, it's loaded with running backs. I feel like we say this almost like every year. I mean, there's just a lot of really talented running backs. I just don't know if Jim Harbaugh and this regime would take one here with pick number 25, but who knows? I'm going to go Kenneth Grant, help boost up the interior of their defensive line. I would say that's kind of the weak spot of the Chargers defense this year has been the middle of their defense. And now you get Kenneth Grant, who's one of the best run stoppers in this draft. I think this makes a ton of sense for them fit-wise. I think they would love to take one of the tight ends, whether that is Loveland or Warren, but I just don't see those guys falling all the way to pick number 25. And I know Charger fans are really hoping for a weapon to give Justin Herbert a bit more help here in this first round, but I just don't really see that happening if the board shakes out this way, and maybe the Chargers would like to attack those needs in the middle rounds. Now the Commanders at 26, I'm going to do something that I haven't done in any of my mock drafts yet. I'm going to have a linebacker in Jahad Campbell go in the first round. I think this could be a sneaky, really fun fit. If you see who the head coach is for the Commanders, which is Dan Quinn, he loves his middle linebackers, a great relationship with Bobby Wagner, but Bobby Wagner is probably going to retire soon, and Campbell could be kind of that next centerpiece of that defense. He's got a huge upside, over 6'3", like 250 pounds, sideline to sideline speed. I think Campbell's going to be an elite linebacker. The problem with linebackers is you usually don't draft them like in the first round or really even like in the mid first. But the Commanders, depending on how the playoffs go, could be picking towards the late 20s. I think you would be fine taking Campbell here, who could be like the leader and new centerpiece of that defense. Obviously, I could see some help on the offensive line, getting like Cameron Williams to play one of the tackle positions. Maybe you could even do a wide receiver. I've seen a couple of mock drafts that have Alec Eumenor or maybe like Isaiah Bond going here. But I think I'm going to do a fun pick and have Campbell go here. The Commanders have been trying to kind of fortify that linebacking position. Drafted Jamin Davis, who I don't even think is on the roster anymore. I think these next few picks, we could see a run on some defensive linemen. And the Ravens, I'm going to have them go Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. He has got fantastic physical traits, over 6'6". He does need some refinement with his pass rushing moves, but Baltimore, they're known for developing players, and especially on the defensive line. And Kyle Van Noy is like their best pass rusher right now, and he's getting up there in age. So they need somebody to develop and also just kind of emerge as their top tier pass rusher in a couple of years. And I think Stewart is one of those types of players. But with that said, I'm going to have James Pierce Jr. go to the Vikings. I mean, I think he would fit really well in Brian Flores' scheme. Who knows if he will be back as defensive coordinator next year, since he is getting some head coach interviews. But Flores loves to bring the zero blitz. He loves having some outside rushers that are very athletic, like Andrew Van Ginkel, who they signed in the offseason, or even Dallas Turner, who they traded up for in the draft. I think James Pierce Jr. is kind of a similar type of skill set where he has good height to him, but not the biggest guy in terms of being able to hold up in the run. He's just very athletic and can get to the quarterback very quickly. I think that's a good scheme fit in Minnesota. And for Buffalo at pick number 29, I'm going to go Derek Harmon out of Oregon. I think maybe the biggest need on Buffalo currently is their interior defensive line. They don't really have somebody that can hold up a double team and be able to stop the run. Ed Oliver is more of a pass rushing interior defensive lineman. And then Daquan Jones, he's fine, but he's also getting up there in age a little bit on I think a 1-year contract as well. So the Bills just need some more depth and rotation in the interior of their defensive line. And Derek Harmon, he's kind of shot up boards recently. He does have some pass rushing juice as well, but I feel like Bills, they just need somebody in the interior of their defensive line. I think that's kind of the missing link and something that could hold them back in the postseason, like if they do have to face off against like Derrick Henry. So Derek Harmon makes a lot of sense to fit here in Buffalo. The Eagles at 30, they love taking their pass rushers. I'm going to go Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. He's 6'7", probably the tallest pass rusher in this draft. Had 7 sacks this year for Arkansas in the SEC. He does have the versatility due to his size to play in the interior a little bit. He only had a few snaps, I believe, for the Razorbacks this year in that spot, but mainly going to be an outside guy for you. But he's got the physical characteristics to be a beast for Howie Roseman. And we know he loves taking players either on the offensive line or defensive line in the first round. And we've seen him in the past few years take some high ceiling guys like Nolan Smith out of Georgia. Kind of a similar type of mold where you're drafting for his ceiling and to develop him. I think Landon Jackson is another one of those players. The Chiefs at 31, I'm going to go with Cameron Williams out of Texas. Their offensive line has been really bad this year, specifically their offensive tackles. I think they even had Joe Tooney, who's like an all-pro guard, move out to play left tackle due to some injuries and performance stuff, but he's been holding it down there, but you would mainly prefer him to play in the interior where you signed him to play. Cameron Williams is more of a right tackle, but I mean, it's not like the Chiefs have a long-term answer at that position either. So Cameron Williams would be a plug-and-play starter, I believe, for Kansas City. Has a very high upside, does need some development and experience, but I trust Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes to kind of work through those things with him. And if he can reach his ceiling, would be a really high-end offensive tackle for the Chiefs here. And then the Lions at 32, I think Princely Umilian out of Mississippi is the fit here. The Lions need some help more on their pass rush. Aiden Hutchinson, he shattered his leg, so who knows how he's going to come back next year, if he will be ready for week 1, or if he will even be the same type of player early in the season. And then even then, you still just need more pass rush help outside of one player. And they did trade for Zadarius Smith, but he's getting up there in age. They don't have him on a contract long term. And then to even add to that, the Lions signed Marcus Davenport, who played like, I think, a couple of games before he got hurt. So they were trying to address that pass rush unit, give it some more juice. I think Princely Umilian is a guy that can sneak into the first round, has some fairly good high upside, and would fit really nicely with what the Lions want to do on that side of the ball. But here is a final look at the mock draft. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think about this. If you like some of the interesting picks I had, like Tyler Warren going to the Dolphins, some of these other players in the back end like Siobhan Revel to Tampa Bay, some unique fits here, but let me know what you think about them. And then specifically for your team, if you liked who I had your team selecting or not, let me know the reasoning for that, and then also players I should look for in the future for your squad. That would be very beneficial for the future mock drafts. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Drop a like on the video if you do enjoy it. I'll be having a ton of draft coverage and content as we lead up to the draft in April. So I'll see you guys in my next one.